everybody. This is Virtual Matter. This will be a new series deviating from Text of the Matter, where we look at subject matter that is outside of actual written text, using a more post-structuralist concept of what a text is. We can look at any type of media, and today we are looking at video games, particularly the Dark Souls series. And with me, I have Jeremy Gordon, a writer who has been at many major outlets, including GQ and The Ringer and Pitchfork. So, hey, Jeremy, how are you doing?
Not bad at all. How are you?
I am doing pretty good. So we had already started talking about this, but Jeremy has written a really insightful essay on the Dark Souls series, the Soulslike to a certain extent, but really the experience of playing Dark Souls within COVID. And Jeremy, I'd like you to describe what drove you to write this essay, what are some of the finer points of the essay, and just what do you think about Dark Souls in general?
Right, of course. So I first started playing the Souls games. I think in 2015. I had Bloodborne, and then a couple of years later I got Dark Souls 3. But it never really hooked me in terms of wanting to see the entire thing play out. I think I had a bit of a phobia about the game's reputations, and I actually think it was you who introduced me to the Demon Souls, maybe like back around when it came out, and I remember playing it and just like getting murked like so fast. Like I don't even think I got past the second boss or anything like that. And then I had a similar experience with Dark Souls 1 like a year later, where I got like started it, maybe got like 2 bosses in, and then just crapped out entirely. So I had this like kind of vestigial fear of the game, but then I'd played the kind of more accessible ones. Although Bloodborne is very difficult, obviously, but I think that the way that it encourages you to play a little bit more aggressively made it easier to get into the series in terms of just getting a feel for how they work. And then during COVID, I mean, my girlfriend and I were mostly, I'd say we were about as like 92% like COVID compliant in terms of like staying in, like we would see people and like go outside and whatnot. But for the most part, we didn't really go many places. So she has a full-time job, and I'm freelancing. And one of the many joys of freelancing is setting your own schedule, by which I mean that on days that I didn't have much to do, I would read or go for a walk, or in many cases play video games. And of course, being a freelancer, I'm also wasn't trying to spend a ton of money on games. So it happened that like I think Dark Souls 2 was just in the PlayStation store for like $5, which is just nothing, all things considered. So I downloaded it, and at first it was Dark Souls 2 has this reputation, which I later found out for being kind of the bad one, they say, which is, not to get into all the cross arguments of the Dark Souls community, but it's definitely a weird one. And so it took a little minute to get into it. But then once I did, I was just like absolutely hooked, and it was the mechanics, the mechanics that I had played before just kind of really absorbing me. And in particularly this time, the difficulty was really, really encouraging, because it was hard as hell.
What the? He's got me! He's devouring me! Yeah! How you die, the magic. Oh! You'll never get me like that. What the? The flying magical bird man! A hole with secret items in that Thruthgar wants. Ah! The fall was too high! No!
Like I kept on dying so many times, and there's some levels where I would just get like waxed over and repeatedly for like hours, or as long as I could be playing, as long as I could justify playing. But I never stopped, unlike in the past where I just sort of given up. I think I really was pushed to keep going through it. And then like Dark Souls 2 gave way to Dark Souls 1, and then I decided to play Dark Souls 3 again. And when I looked back at it, it was just kind of like 4 or 5 month chunk where I really wasn't playing anything but these games, you know, and obviously I was going about my life as usual, but when it came to like sitting down with my video games, like this was it. So I started just you know, I got so into it that of course there's this tendency when you're freelancing, you can't indulge it too much, but it's like you know, what can you're looking for things to write about, and I think I had been doing some kind of more traditional reported things, and then I just had the flip side of it. It was just like, well, what if I just wrote like an essay about this series, and was able to kind of indulge some of my more I keep on calling it self-indulgent. It's not entirely self-indulgent, but indulge some of my more you know, just messing around tendencies. So I pitched it and they said yes. And I wanted to get into the games, not just via my own experience, but what had really made it so exciting, which was the community aspect of it. I am not good at these games at all. Like I guess I'm decent. You know, if someone would invade me, I could maybe fend for myself or whatnot. But so many of the bosses are just like were insurmountable for me, or rather, you know, given I wasn't going to be sitting there for hours at a time trying to beat this one boss. So I would try to summon people, and I think the way that the summoning system works in these games was like unexpectedly touching, sort of. I mean, you just get these strangers from nowhere who you don't communicate with, just kind of materializing in your world, and they help you out, and then you move on and you never interact again. And I think as someone who's, you know, I never really took to online gaming in the way that it blew up over the last decade or 15 years or whatever, as it's such a time commitment, and you have to schedule and you have to do all of these things. But with Dark Souls, it was so much more casual and yet like impactful. And I think the creator of the game, Miyazaki, he made this analogy about how he wanted the community system to be kind of like a stranger helping you out with your car. If you're stuck on the road, you know, you pull over and you can't drive or whatever, and then someone just stops and helps you out and then goes along their way, and kind of this more casual thing. And I don't know, I think I had so many kind of memorable experiences with that, whether or not it was just like some stranger helping me with a boss, or getting invaded, or someone helping me out with an invader, that it really struck me as this kind of like generative thing, despite the games being years old at this point. And then of course I got into Reddit a little bit and was looking around and just like realizing that like there was this more or less helpful, friendly community around it, which is saying a lot, because I don't know, I started it's obviously an extremely cool thing to brag about, but I did start like lurking more Reddits in the last couple of years, and you can kind of get a sense of like what communities are the most like permissive or welcoming or argumentative or whatnot. And like, you know, Dark Souls has its quirks, but for the most part, everybody there was like really just like gung-ho to get into this thing and very encouraging and whatnot. So all of these thoughts kind of fed into the piece, and then I just kind of wrote it and went from there.
Yeah, well, you know, one thing that I found striking about the piece was this idea of the odd communal relationships that you create while playing Dark Souls. For those who haven't played the game, in the Dark Souls games, you have these what are they, stones essentially, that you can summon with, and you can or you can be invaded by a sort of shadow form of another character, and it allows you to interact with them, but there is no headset, there is no talking. And as a player of some online games, particularly fighting games, Mortal Kombat, for instance.
Sit there and watch it. Am I supposed to disconnect from this fucking lobby? You should play it. I thought fucking tens of thousands players better than you. Who the fuck are you? Who the fuck are you? You prick. Shut up.
As a player of online fighters, and particularly Mortal Kombat, where they allow full microphone use, it lends itself to a form of toxicity.
Dude, I'm gonna fucking get so pissed off that you're not gonna get a fucking kill on me!
Bro.
And I've seen that, you know, from afar in like Call of Duty and Fortnite and games like that, where, you know, the only reason that you're interacting with someone else is at a competitive level. Now, of course, there are many co-op games, and they create maybe similar forms of enjoyment, but very often with other games I've played, the Ghost Recon series, or even, let's say, Killing Floor or something like that. These games, you're always either joining up with friends or joining up with a bunch of people on mic who you can go with for an extensive period of time. And in Dark Souls, there is really this kind of block from it. And that analogy that Miyazaki makes with someone helping you with your car is pretty apt. They're in there for a moment, and then they disappear, and you may get aided by someone completely different with a completely different build, and you see something else from the game, and it has a sort of generative quality. You learn about the mechanics by seeing other people play, and so on.
No, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, sorry, was there a question?
No, there wasn't a question. I was just commenting. So, you know, what do you think structurally, right, makes it so that these Dark Souls games are so engaging and functioned in this way for you in a period of time where you had, you know, a fair amount of time to play video games?
I think, like, perversely, it is the difficulty, but not just the difficulty, but I think kind of how tightly designed these games are, and how the experiences, they, as soon as you die and you come back to life, everything unfolds the same way. It's not like a roguelike in the sense where you're kind of it's a roll of the dice. You With Dark Souls, everything unfolds the exact same way. I mean, like, for example, like, there's a level in Dark Souls 1 called Sen's Fortress, and the way it unfolds is like, and this is like a notorious area in the series, but it's like you respawn at the checkpoint, you have to cross this long bridge, you see this entrance, if you run it straight through, you're gonna step on a stone plate, a trap that fires an arrow at you, and it'll fuck you up for a little bit. And then at the same time, these two lizard enemies will come at you from different sides. So not only do you have to, and one of those will fuck you up. So the very first time that I went to Sen's Fortress, I went straight ahead, got hit by the arrow, stunned, enemies came, like, fucked me up, and then I died. So then I respawned again, crossed the bridge, avoided the stone plate, but this time I just got trapped by the two enemies and they fucked me up. And then, but this the third time, I killed the enemies, avoided the stone plate, went up the stairs, and then I think there's this other bridge with all these swinging axes, and then one of the axes knocked me down and killed me. So, like, bit by bit, like, the more you play, the more you kind of become aware of what is in front of you, and you think to yourself, like, okay, I have to avoid, I have to do X, Y, Z. It's almost this checklist in your head, but the checklist does lend itself towards, like, a form of mastery, because these games the mechanics of them are not brutally challenging. I mean, I think a game that is so much more difficult to master is something like, honestly, like NBA 2K1. If you think about, like, the dozens or hundreds of, like, sub motions with the joysticks in order to, like, make someone do a crossover, like, that's so much harder to pull out intuitively than any of the Dark Souls games. But with Dark Souls, you just kind of have to get accustomed to what is happening, and almost, like, kind of pull off the perfect just chain of events to get through. Although, of course, there is, like, randomness, in as much as, like, maybe someone attacks you and knocks you off the platform when you're not expecting it, or whatever, or just, like, you forget about some boulder or some spike or pit of lava or whatever, because random shit does happen all the time. But I think it's that sort of, like, that loop of not just difficulty, but the fact that it's kind of this formula, and once you master it, you can you move forward. And I think that's kind of borne out. If you go back and do the New Game Plus, I mean, obviously you're stronger, but I don't know. I've started new games entirely from scratch in Dark Souls and Bloodborne and whatnot, and I'm just a lot better because I know what's coming, and, like, there's still surprise, and you still have to fight the enemies and not die or whatnot. But I think the familiarity of it lends itself to a sort of mastery that's really addictive once you get into it, especially because I mean the worlds that they make are so absorbing in terms of not just like the lore but the actual physicality. Like you want to keep exploring it, you want to keep on seeing what's going on, and then every time you just get a little bit further or unlock a new area, it's very exciting.
Well, I think that difficulty and mastery aspect is one of the interesting kind of relationships between the original Demon Souls and its recent remake, which kind of
Hmm.
brought more people to it than it originally happened
Hmm.
when it originally was released. As an aside, I remember when Demon Souls was released in Japan, and I was among a bunch of gamers that was arguing for it to get released stateside. And when it did, I remember my friend and I, we were like staying over at the same house. We had two TVs set up. One of us playing Dragon Age Origins, and the other playing Demon Souls, or Demon Souls. And just I was playing Demon Souls a lot and just dying and dying and dying. And he's going and like going through the story with narrative, etc. But he's constantly looking over at the TV, waiting for his turn to go and like go through this same process. And so like difficulty, it's almost a callback to some of the early difficult games that you might play, like say Mario, the original Mario 2.
Right, like
or
Battletoads or something.
or some Final Fight, something like this, right? Like where you always with present design, there's in open world games, etc. There's this idea of like this sort of iterative system where your enemies will be in a slightly different place or in a slightly different formation, and because of that, you will have to change your tactics slightly based on the situation. But Dark Souls does not work on that. It sets the bar extremely high from the beginning, and then it takes practice and actual engagement with the game rather than like an accrual of skills. Yes, of course, you upgrade your character, but it's often that expansion of your character is met with an expansion of the difficulty of the enemies. And so it never feels like you're outflanking the game. Say in Elder Scrolls, where you can level up and then completely annihilate anything in the world,
Yeah, and I think one of the despite being a similar formula that you're trying to master, the game is just like difficult enough that you can just get fucking killed right away. Like even if you're not careful, because I think the one thing that all of the games kind of share is this emphasis on patience. Like almost without fail, every single time in any of these games, when I've decided like fuck it, I'm just going in, I die like immediately. And that's difficult to, and emotionally that's difficult to push back on, because your instinct. I mean, you've been playing this game. I mean, I think there was one level in Dark Souls 2 where I had been playing it, just I couldn't get to the end, and every time I died I got more frustrated, so I would try to play even faster, which meant I would like die again. So it was this kind of like push and pull between like I know what I have to do, but I'm so mad that I'm not doing it that I keep on like just kind of rushing and speeding through, which of course makes me die again, which makes me more upset. And eventually I kind of just like you have to take an enemy one at a time. You need to like whittle away and take a moment. You can't squeeze in too many hits, because then like you might just die. And I think that's a really most games don't really work like that. I mean, you're when I say most games, I'm kind of referring to the like, let's say big budget AAA like God of Wars, even, and so on and so forth. You are kind of encouraged to just like push forward and like button mash almost to an extent. And I think what's so instructive is kind of how just popular the Dark Souls games are. They sold, like Bloodborne sold an incredible amount of copies in the US. Demon Souls, I mean, think about what it takes for the Demon Souls remake to get announced as a launch title for the PlayStation 5. Like internally they're like, we're putting together the small roster of games that will showcase everything that this console can do and like what we want people to get from it. And they picked a remake of this insanely notoriously difficult game from 11 years before, not only with confidence that the gameplay could be translated, updated for the modern technology, but that people would buy it,
Yeah.
and that they could make it really challenging. Like Demon Souls is, it's easier than the other games, but it's still really insanely difficult in parts. I mean, there are passages that are just like, I mean, can imagine would I frustrate the hell out of me. Like I always imagine, I feel like I was in GameStop a couple years ago, and maybe I was overhearing some mom with her kid talking to the clerk, being like, "So tell me about like what's Bloodborne, what's this?" And like that's a lot of how these games are bought still. It's like parents getting them for the kids, and just like think about it's this game that's gonna fucking make them shriek at the wall
Yeah.
for hours, and yet like they had full confidence that that was worth putting out there. So I do think it kind of speaks to some, latent desire within the broader gaming community that despite how inclusive and how accessible things have gotten in the years past, I mean, you and I have basically grown up like, I mean, gaming is one of those weird mediums where, I mean, we've been alive for essentially like almost the entire push of gaming as a mainstream concept.
Yes.
I mean, but what the first Mario comes out in like 85 or 84 or something, and
Mhm.
I'm born in 88, and then it kind of just like keeps it kind of it keeps getting more serious in there. And games are much easier than they used to be by and large. I mean, that's just, I mean, not just in terms of console games, but like the games you play on your phone, like they're kind of meant to be these entertainments or distractions. But that does create the like conditions for excitement around something that is so purposefully inaccessible that like forces you to meet it on its level. I mean, there's no difficulty sliders, there's no easy mode. The best you can do is summon another player to help you out, but then the game is just hard enough that like maybe that doesn't work. I've had plenty of experiences where I tried to summon someone to help me with the boss, and we just got our asses kicked immediately because it still works like that. And I think that is that kind of challenge creates a bonding among the players where it's like, I know what it's like because oh yeah, like Ornstein and Smo. I remember my first time facing them,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
the Prince Lothric or any of the more challenging bosses. And it's like, not this. I mean, obviously, I'm sure there's some like Uber gamers who pride themselves on their like machismo but I don't know. I have to believe that most people have a little bit of self-awareness about like the fundamental nerdiness or the fundamental like not frivolousness. Yeah, just it's
Yes.
like we're talking about video games here. We're talking about like fantasy shit that you do play as a sideshow. It's not real life, but that because it's not real life, because it is so inconsequential, I think kind of raises the fun of it to just like engage purely as opposed to trying to like you know pathologize it or making it your way of life, as opposed to like a competitive game like God, Super Smash Brothers or Call of Duty or Counter-Strike or any of these online
Yeah.
games where you really can form an identity around it. And Dark Souls is fairly self-contained.
Yeah.
It's you and some strangers, and then that's it.
And going back to the Demon Souls to Dark Souls shift, I think there was a structural shift that they made, and that kind of transformed it and made it even more engaging to people. And that was the world design. Like in Demon Souls, you have a central hub and there's multiple levels. And then within those levels, there are some doors that open up and make some cuts
Yeah.
from one place to another. But what became kind of the central tenet of the Souls-like, and that begins with the actual Souls games, is this sort of Metroid-vania style design, whereas in Metroid-vania maybe it is you find a new weapon and that therefore you can open a new door and now you have a new pathway to go through. In this, if you defeat a certain amount of enemies, etc., you're able to go and find a key and unlock some gate, and now all of a sudden you can go from one bonfire being, as most people know, the way that you kind of save the game, but also the way that enemies return from the dead, and then are able to cross a space of the game that would have been much longer, right? And so it allows for this kind of traversal, and that sort of exploration became another part of the Souls-like system. And so it's very interesting, those games in a self-contained sense, how popular they have been. But we've also seen an enormous amount of games of Souls-likes that have come out, and there also is a certain amount of disputation of what that actually means. So of course there are games like Neo, you know,
I think Neo in particular was interesting to me because when I played it, and you know, I don't know, I probably played it like 20 hours or something, but I lost interest. I mean, not just because of how difficult the game was, but how disjointed the storytelling was. And you know, it's kind of similar to a Demon Souls where you're moving around, jumping from level to level, but it never really feels connected. And the story, the narrative is like almost like off-puttingly incoherent, or at least to me. Versus like Dark Souls or even Demon Souls, where not only are this Demon Souls obviously is level by level, but the Dark Souls games are a little bit more interconnected. But the world that they're describing is actually, I think, just a little bit more intriguing. And partly, you know, I wrote about this in the piece, but the way they do that, which is just by submerging so many of the details and the deeper mythology and kind of letting you uncover it, but also not really, if you don't want to. Like, that's very alluring. I mean, every game today is so thick, or not every game, but so many fantasy games and games today are so thick with mythology, and they're just like, you know, you play Skyrim or whatever, and there's thousands of books you can pick up and read text of, and like that's certainly, you know, enjoyable to a point, but I always feel a little bit of like overload when it comes like information, when it's like, oh my god, how am I supposed to remember all these things about all these people? But with Dark Souls, it's just kind of there under the surface, and you can partake in it as much or as little as you want. And you know,
oh, sorry to interrupt, but yeah, I think that like that doing away with the Codex, right, was a very active decision against the way that lore was told in video games.
The Asari were the first species to discover the Citadel. When the Solarians arrived, it was the Asari who proposed the establishment of the Citadel Council to maintain peace throughout the galaxy. Since then, the Asari have served as the mediators and centrists of the Council. An all-female race, the Asari reproduce through a form of parthenogenesis.
I mean, almost every open-world game, you can go to an almost superfluous menu and have a list of every single enemy and every single person you meet and all these little side stories, and it essentially is an encyclopedia, whereas there's so much environmental storytelling within the Dark Souls games that allows you to, you know, learn this little bit and that little bit, and from that has come a whole community of interpretation of the kind of lore of Dark Souls, and it has a degree of mystery to it, which I think goes along with the gameplay.
Mm-hmm. And especially across the games, Dark Souls 1 through 3, there are these little connections that become, you know, more resonant. Like Dark Souls 2 is kind of, it's more often its own world, but you still have some of these little threads. But Dark Souls 3 makes a pretty clear loop from the first game and some elements in the second one. And, you know, I kind of experienced it in reverse because I think the first one that I played was Dark Souls 3. But when I went back and played them in order, sort of like, I don't know, it was just so much more meaningful and resonant. And that's even in this game where the storytelling is like not as pronounced, but you know, unless you're just not paying attention at all, you can't help but pick up these little cues, you know, whether or not it's like returning to like Anne Orlando or just in the DLC in Dark Souls 3 where you go back to the original Firelink Shrine and just kind of see the way that the universe kind of encourages you to think of this you know, it's this worlds of decay. And I think there was I talked to a guy who makes or in my piece I talked to a YouTube creator who makes lore videos.
The dark surrounds me, nibbles at my flesh. Little creatures, they never stop biting. So please, hold out your hand and touch me.
And he was just kind of talking about like the way that it you know, the mystery of it, the allure of this universe that takes place on the scale of thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years, where the civilizations have come and gone and come and gone and come and gone, but it all kind of counts for something at the end of it, like all the detritus and like bullshit, it all ends up somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I agree with you about Neo. I've not beat Neo 2, which I think is better designed. I beat Neo 1, but it was kind of a trudge. And I've tried a couple other ones. The Surge, which was given for free on PlayStation Plus. It has some interesting mechanics. For instance, you know, when you beat your enemies, they drop off parts of their body, and you can create a multitude of weapons out of them. But there seems to be something that I think is missed in the most direct interpretations of the Souls experience, which is that expansive world, that mystery of storytelling, etc., is a large part of what draws people in and keeps them there, keeps them interested in the game itself. When you're sending people down like corridors and it's just like, oh, beat another hard enemy and you get this item, and then on top of that, they just try to mimic AAA storytelling. There's actually something lost in this process. I'm not sure exactly what the connection is there, like how those things inform one another and how it seems to work less well when you go for that AAA style of storytelling, and which will be interesting for Elden Ring, which has this George R.R. Martin stamp of
Right.
fact or whatever on it. But
yeah, that's super interesting to me because, you know, I said something like this before, but what's interesting is how you know, popular Dark Souls is. Like it is a triple A game, but at the same time they kind of avoid all of the cliches and pitfalls that everything else you know, can't help but fall prey to. Because you know, I don't know everything about how games are designed and developed, but you know, it's this massive undertaking that requires coordination across dozens and dozens and dozens of people. And you know, you make one change in one area and it throws everything else off. And with the storytelling, it's almost it's elegant in a sense that they manage to put so much subtlety and complexity into the storytelling, despite like this every directive that says like you need to be more clear, you need to be more accessible, you need to say what is going on, and they just kind of ignore all of that, and it clearly resonates with some people because again, like even Elden Ring, like I know it has the George R.R. Martin thing, but it's still the latest game from these people who make this brutally difficult series, and yet it's going to be, you know, one of the most hotly anticipated game, like the game that they're putting out there and to get people excited about. So I don't know. It's inspiring a little. Inspiring. I mean, I don't know what's inspired me towards, but I guess it's just nice that there's still stuff like that being made despite every trend of modernity.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely think that it is a callback to older games, to the experience of playing Mega Man or whatever. Like these games that people truly struggled over, but there was a sense of enjoyment in overcoming that struggle. And one of the games I think most distinctly failed at being a direct Souls-like was Jedi Fallen Order. I don't know if you played that game.
Yeah, I did, yeah.
But what it tried to do was sort of synthesize a sort of Uncharted / Titanfall type of platforming with a Souls-like battle system that was slightly less difficult, right?
Yeah.
But what came out was, and then also have this big AAA Star Wars galaxy-spanning story in the middle. But what I got out of it was really just kind of a mess, a hodgepodge of, you know, sort of bad AI, sort of open, empty worlds that were supposed to mimic kind of like that emptiness of Dark Souls, but the emptiness did not make sense within the kind of conceptual realm of Star Wars.
Yeah.
And then the addition of these kind of all other mechanics to just make it slightly more AAA and slightly more flashy, all they did was just make it more frustrating. Like, you know, I died more falling off of ledges than I did at attacking enemies. And I put the game down probably, you know, 10 hours in, even though it was much shorter and much less of a daunting task to beat than a Dark Souls game.
Yeah, that game was funny because I did play it also last year during in the earlier days of quarantine, and yeah, there was this kind of underwhelming aspect to it. Like I did beat it, but I do remember having this sense of like, you know, oh, the first world we saw, that's how cool, and the second world we saw, how cool. Like I can't wait for more of it. And then this kind of like sinking feeling that sat in where I was like, oh, there's like 6 worlds in this whole game or whatever, you know, like it's so limited, all things considered. But because, you know, they kind of trying to have it both ways where like, you know, they tease at this, they tease this larger world, but they just don't show enough to really get you excited. Like, I don't know, it's a weird analogy, but I don't know if you played, do you play Kingdom Hearts 3 a couple years ago?
I avoided Kingdom Hearts 3. I did play Final Fantasy 15 and 7 with
well, I won't sell you on it at all, but Kingdom Hearts 3, like bad game, you know. I mean, I was looking forward to it, and it just wasn't any it was just awful. I could spend days talking about it, but one of the reasons why it was so bad is that the world actually somehow got smaller than Kingdom Hearts 2. So Kingdom Hearts 2 comes out in 2005. It has more levels, and the levels have like more to do and see in them. Now, granted, like Kingdom Hearts 3 like looks beautiful, like it's a cartoon and whatnot, but that sense of like contraction was really kind of astonishing. I mean, there was a similar feeling of like there's so many of these games are like they tease like this expansion and this massive universe and all of these like wonderful things, and then you get into it and there's just really not that much, whereas like I think with the Dark Souls does kind of the reverse, where they don't really tease how big this world is going to be at all. It's just you just start making these connections, and then you know whether or not it's the way that the worlds interlink with each other, or that the characters who just kind of turn out to have some sort of relationship, and all these like more subtle gestures, as opposed to like the oversell of like, you know, there's all the shit being a big deal.
Yeah, I think in video games there is a difficulty to create a genuine sense of discovery, and in many of them they've either taken this kind of old school Final Fantasy style approach to it, where it's like, oh, we'll just create this massive mythological feeling of being the one hero, right? And then through that you sort of kind of are supposed to work it out with your mind, despite the actual content being limited. Another game that I would put in there is Mass Effect Andromeda, which had many other problems, but it was supposed to be this like planet hopping, geoforming super game, and it turned out to have like, you know, 6 or 7 worlds where you go to, and then all the enemies are extremely buggy, and the story is worse than anything that was done in the previous games.
Well, a game that I've been trying to get back into, you know, I always say that I'm going to give it another shot, is No Man's Sky. Did you ever play that one?
Yeah.
So I bought No Man's Sky like week 1, like when it came out. Like I remember actually really acutely. I was on vacation with our buddy Matthew, and then I got back, and like the next day like went to like GameStop and picked it up and was like, hell yes, like ready to go, let's go. And it was underwhelming. Like I didn't hate it as much as like everyone else did, but like, it was clearly that they just hadn't like put it together. But now over the years they've introduced so many concepts to it, to the point where it's just this completely new game. But that seems like the closest thing to fulfilling the promise of like the expansion, like kind of fuck around and do whatever you want, as opposed to like most of these other games, you know, like even the most recent Final Fantasy, I think what was it, 15, the single player, where like you have this massive world and it's like teases exploration, but then like the more you play, the more you realize you're just kind of on rails.
You're on rails. The car's on rails.
And it's just too much.
Empty desert, you know.
And you know, I think there is such a thing where it's a tricky balance. You actually can't have too much content in a game if you are trying to appeal to people who do have jobs or loving relationships or children or whatever, especially as gaming has become this thing that is not just sold to like cloistered off nerds, teenagers, like with hours to burn.
Well, yeah, I mean, like obviously the average gamer age is now like 30 years old,
Hmm.
and the other style of game I was going to mention earlier is the Ubisoft game, where they just pack an infinite amount of copied missions, and all you do is just grind and grind and grind. Um, though I've actually enjoyed it purely because of the co-op experience. I played the most recent Ghost Recon,
Oh yeah.
and it actually has its own form of a shrine, like Dark
Hmm.
Souls. They're called biovacs. You go there and you get like little perks that last for an hour. It works as a co-op game. If I enter it as a single player game, the map is so large, everything is so you know immediately similar to what you just did that
Hmm.
it makes no sense as a single player game. And I've seen like I had the same experience with Assassin's Creed Odyssey. I've seen people have the same experience with Watch Dogs Legion, and I think Dark Souls strikes a nice balance. But what I think this is a good point to kind of spin into is the question of the Souls-like and the meaning of the Souls-like. I personally just watched a video in preparation for this about what is a Souls-like, and the point of view of the YouTube creator that made this video was that Souls-like had lost meaning, and that the inclusion of games like Hades, like Hollow Knight, like Dead Cells, like Cuphead, etc., just because they were difficult or just because
Hmm.
you die and restart, it doesn't make it a Souls-like. And I found this to be somewhat insufficient because he even included a game like Salt and Sanctuary, which is very clearly the translation of Dark Souls from 3D into 2D. And so
Hmm.
I think there are some games that, they kin very closely to the style of Dark Souls. And then there is this roguelite genre that also takes great influence from Dark Souls. Hades, I think, is one in particular. But what do you think about this general genre and the meaning of it, and what the general effects of Dark Souls have been on video games?
It's funny because none of the Souls-like games have ever really like stuck with me. Like I do have tended to trend enjoy stuff that's like kind of at least one or two steps removed. Like Neo is just a little too hard, or something like Salt and Sanctuary, like not quite absorbing enough.
I
But
agree.
I do think the paramount is like the closed loop that we were talking about, the idea that like every level is the same, but you just kind of have to master it. Like if anything, I thought I know to me Hollow Knight is closer to a Souls like, but apparently that is not considered to be the case. Maybe because it's like kind of more of a platformer. 'Cause, yeah, I
Yeah.
guess Dark Souls doesn't really have that sense. But I don't know.
Yeah.
Salt and Sanctuary also has some level of platforming, and I do think it's like not so much the difficulty. I mean, the difficulty is obviously important, but it's really the mastery of a similar environment as opposed to Hades, which is like or Dead Cells, where it's more randomly generated, and you're kind of hoping to get like the right the right
Weapon and whatever.
mix.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think it speaks to like why some of these other games haven't stuck with me, is just because like you need some uh not just lore necessarily, but even like beautiful visuals are crucial. I mean, the worlds in Dark Souls are so. I mean, I'm gonna sound corny as hell, but like on some level, they are like breathtaking. I mean, the moment in Dark Souls 3 where you uh, like finally stumble upon like Irithyll, the Boreal Valley, or like the first time you get to Anor Londo in Dark Souls 1, like there are these moments that just kind of beg your curiosity and attention of like what's going on there, and I want to keep going and just see like see all these things that this place has to offer. Where I think the games, many of the Souls-like games, they try to replicate that difficulty, but they don't really communicate the same grandeur, either like
Yeah.
conceptually or just like graphics. I mean, not to be like a prioritized graphics, but like, I don't know, fuck it, it does matter. I think looking at simply how beautiful something is like can have an effect, especially with like the Demon Souls. The remake is just so unbelievable to look at, that it really drove a lot of my engagement just to see what would happen.
Yeah, I think From Software actually took interesting influence from games like Shadow of the Colossus. And Eco, right? Like these were games where, they were largely empty and they were largely silent, but they created these incredibly open, engaging worlds built around like big, either in Eco you had these like big puzzle like areas that you had to solve, and in Shadow of the Colossus you obviously had the Colossi, right? But in between those spaces, you're just looking at the map. You're looking at the region that you're in, and in feeling this kind of size, you feel very small in it, and it makes your journey feel more expansive, and it doesn't require you to be, the one particular specific hero, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to be Cloud. You don't have to be, a Commander Shepard to feel value in these.
Yeah, and I think I feel like so new agey when I say this, but I do think it is shared by enough people that primarily a large appeal of my relationship to gaming at this point in my life is like meditative in a sense. I mean, it's the only medium that demands your full engagement, but also leaves you room to think about other things. Like it's not like reading a book where you have to concentrate on this text in front of you and absorbing it, or like a movie where you kind of ideally you're just you're watching it, you're not on your phone or anything like that. Like video games require this constant engagement. You have to be very present, but at the same time, because so many of them are not like so conceptually heavy that you're just trying to understand something, you can kind of think about other things. And there's so many games that do well to kind of they keep your hands busy, or your hand-eye or your visual coordination like engaged, but they do leave the space for you to just like to appreciate not just what's happening on screen, but also just kind of like reflect, put you in another space. I mean, the one of the things about did you ever see Ready Player One?
I did, yeah. Actually, pretty
Subject for another time. I sort of really enjoyed it, which is like a horrible, like makes me sound like makes me sound like an idiot, but like
no, that'll be a good conversation.
it's charming.
I actually enjoyed some of it as well. So
yeah. Well, the book is terrible, but like the movie, I don't know. I remember seeing it as a joke with my friend because it was in the days of Movie Pass when you could just see whatever.
Oh yeah.
And then like halfway through the movie, I leaned over and like whispered to her, just with this like, I think this might be kind of good. Like, I'm not, I was expecting this to be like just laughably shitty, but then you're just like, all right, it's Steven Spielberg. Like, I don't know, like he knows how to make an entertaining movie. I wouldn't put it on my top 10 list or whatever, but you can do worse if you want to be entertained. But anyways, the depressing thing about Ready Player One, or the savvy thing rather, is they kind of gesture this future world in which like our physical reality is so diminished by, corporations and climate change and all these things and capitalism and XYZ, that the only way to have a kind of engaging mental or spiritual experience is to escape to this digital world. I really hope we don't get there in my lifetime or our lifetime or our children's lifetimes or whatever.
Yes.
But I think there is a similar effect today where like, I'm especially during quarantine when I was like stuck inside, not really doing much, and the weather was shitty, and I would play a game like Ghost of Tsushima or even like Fallen Order, Dark Souls, and like right, especially like Ghost of Tsushima or even like Assassin's Creed Valhalla right now, where they just like create these worlds that look so beautiful and just kind of stand around, and you just have time to like think about other shit. And I do think there's something to that effect in like Dark Souls or Bloodborne, where it's obviously there's more like gore and violence and more things that can kill you at any moment, but you do have these kind of spaces of such like grandeur and awe, like breathtaking architecture that do allow you to just like, I don't know, reflect on
Yeah.
the many things and under the stars.
And they create other sensations. I mean, like, there is something to be said about when a giant axe of like the first boss of Demon Souls is being swung at you for the first time, or whatever your first boss is in one of these games from software, that you have a genuine sense of fear and anxiety, and it's a lot different than the kind of, I know I'm going to die and end up 5 feet away so that I can go and do this over again. There are games that I've experienced that create what you were talking about before, games like Breath of the Wild or Horizon or something like that, right? But there are very few games that, to me, can create a genuine sense of dread and fear, and at the same time keep me completely engaged in doing whatever it is we're trying to do. We had a conversation off screen about Resident Evil, right? You were talking about Resident Evil 7. It creates this like genuinely, I just repeat it, it creates this genuinely uncomfortable feeling, and I can completely understand someone not wanting that uncomfortable feeling.
Right? I know, I was so put off. I was like, I've been joking with my buddy Aaron that like we're just kind of looking for games with good vibes, which like not to sound like Zoomers at Burning Man or whatever cliche right out, but like there's something, but it does kind of speak to the meditative thing that I'm talking about, where like I'm not against like some gritty, intense thing, but sometimes it's just like, man, the vibes are not right. Maybe in the future on Resident Evil, but I really think, but yeah, no, there's definitely that sense of fear. That's the other thing. I mean, I didn't really get into this in my piece, although a little bit, but the From Software games, like nothing else I've ever played, and I've been playing video games since I was 8 or whatever, and across the entire spectrum from Sonic to today, and the physical sense of like fear and like nerves and tension is like pretty unmatched by like anything else that I've ever played. I mean, I think the first, when I played Bloodborne, like my first real experience with these games, I think I want to say it was the boss Vicar Amelia. Did you play Bloodborne? We talked about this, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so Vicar Amelia, like fifth boss, not like the most challenging boss in the, like maybe the hardest boss up until that point. I mean, I know people argue about these different things, but I think it's like not just the fact that it's challenging, but also like the run to get to where she is like a little, there's tons of shit that could just kill you. And similarly, what you were saying before, it's like, if you die, you have to run, you have to walk it all the way back, and you have to go through the enemies, and the enemies just could kill you. I mean, like you have to be patient, and you can't just like rush through. You have to like take your time and get back. And Vicar Amelia, I think, amazingly, when I first played Bloodborne, I didn't realize that you could summon other people or other NPCs. I beat that whole game like by myself, where it's like, I don't know. I think it was the only time. And then I think I was in the DLC and I realized, like, wait a minute, what's this like glowing sign? I can like reach someone. I was like kind of pissed off about it, but which meant that like I do get the full visceral sense of that challenge of just like doing it all by yourself. And with Vicar Amelia, like I can almost remember it acutely because I don't think I'd eaten dinner yet because it was like the golden hour where I was just like waiting to meet some people or whatever. Or maybe not. It's very likely also that I was just playing Bloodborne by myself on Friday night. But whatever it was, I was like hungry, and after like a dozen plus tries or whatever, including like moments where I got attempts where I got killed right away, attempts where I got her down to like 2 hits and then got killed, and I finally like did it. And like not only did I like let loose this kind of humiliating animal shriek, but like I actually felt like my whole body like thrum with like adrenaline, and like all of a sudden my hunger hit me like I hadn't realized, but I'd been like so wired that I didn't even realize that I had to eat, and it was just like Oh my god, the skies parted and I felt so accomplished and I shut it off and like got a meal or whatever. And like that just doesn't happen in anything else that I've like the sense of drama with the music and the fact that like any hit could be your next, your death. And it's really unmatched, and at least by anything that I've ever played.
Well, the only thing that I really can add to that is that I do think that's an influence that I've seen on a couple games. Some that we've mentioned, like Hades, is one that I had that experience where when I finally beat Hades, I was playing it on a Switch and I had upgraded everything. I had died. I had learned these bosses like the back of my hand. I felt, an extreme amount of elation. And recently, another game, which is of a completely different genre, but which I think felt the influence of Dark Souls, is Doom Infinite's DLC, right?
I never played that.
Doom Infinite is a great game, and it's quite difficult in and of itself, but they told you when they released the DLC, you're probably going to have to go down a level of difficulty from where you played. Well, I played at normal. That leaves me only at like one difficulty setting to go down. And even there, for a person who's playing a wide variety of games rather than just fixating on one specific game, I'm going through it and I'm fighting like, in enormous rooms filled with the hardest enemies in the game, saving up my BFG rounds. And when I beat a room, I feel like, wow, I just did something. And I would say in the last generation of games, well, I guess 2 generations ago now, PS3, despite enjoying and loving quite a many games, there weren't many experiences that I had like that. And it's only been after Dark Souls that I felt like this kind of Metroid style structure, this interest in difficulty, this mystery of design, that all of these elements have come together to produce some new things that may not exactly be like Souls games, but they generally create new experiences that we hadn't had in gaming before, or at least for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that kind of speaks to this shift in what I'm looking for as I get older and attempt to maintain an adult life, which is like these games that have like infinite exploration. When I was a kid, that's all I wanted. I can recall these conversations I had with my friends where we would be like, oh my God, GamePro says that the new Final Fantasy has 100 hours of gameplay. And we're like, oh, like I wish it was 200 hours because, you're a kid, you don't have things to do. And today it's just like not possible. I mean, I think like I've played a lot of the AAA games in the last 5 years, and the ones that I haven't finished are the ones that just like keep on going. Like I did not finish Red Dead Redemption. I'm playing Valhalla right now, but that game actually does a lot of like interesting quality of life improvements to make it feel less like cluttered with stuff, which is great because I think the Ubisoft model that you talked about was like just kind of unsustainable, or not unsustainable, but became this kind of cliche for shorthand to players. It's like, well, like what you're gonna get. It's gonna be a big old map. You're gonna have 1,000 little check marks just like begging for your attention. But now today, what's really much more appealing is the idea of this like finite, not just a finite experience, but like one with very specific goalposts, like beat this boss, then you're done with this level. It may be really hard. Like you may end up playing as much as you would be playing, Red Dead Redemption or Grand Theft Auto, but the goals are so much more defined. You're not just like, you're not just dropped in the middle of the map and say, go figure it out. You're able to, it's a very clear straight line more or less they have to go on. Even something like Breath of the Wild, I didn't finish that game and it's beautiful, but then I got like whatever 50 hours in and I was just sort of like, oh fuck it.
You've got an experience.
Yeah, like, I know I don't really need to beat Ganon. I know I'm going to,
Yeah, I mean, I had a similar experience with Ghost of Tsushima right now. I unlocked the second island and I was like, well, I've gone into enough camps, I know what this game is about. And, conversely from what you were saying, COVID actually allowed me to beat Red Dead Redemption 2, which I had been unable to play and had been stopped just in the first act. like 4 times and sold the game, and then finally rebought it, and was able to just realize that this, much like say The Last of Us 2, is one of another type of great game, which maybe we can talk about another time, which is the introduction of sort of a higher level of narrative into video games, which is something very different from what Dark Souls does. But
Yeah.
I completely agree that I think all of us, who are ranging from, our late 20s to mid 30s and are grasping adulthood, the mix of work, of play, of life outside of this sort of insular solitary bubble that we had when we were children, have to find very specific ways of indulging that if we like video games, and that game makers do better or worse jobs at actually fulfilling that. And the Ubisoft model, I think, is a perfect example of a failure. I want to try Valhalla now that you have said that you've enjoyed it, but my last experience was just nightmarish because I was like, I'm 20 hours in and I have no idea how far in the story I am into this game. But,
well, Valhalla is really interesting because the way that it's still, you still got this map and all and whatnot and all these little things to do, but none of it, almost none of the quests, none of the side quests like pop up on your hub or your like your checklist of what to do. There's none of that sense of being overwhelmed by like, oh my god, I unlocked these like 15 side quests just by ambling down, and now my OCD tendency will kick in if I don't like go bit by bit. Like I think the you see stuff on the map and you can go towards it and figure it out, and then but it never tells you what to do. Like it doesn't say, like, it's not just, it's so paint by numbers where it's like go collect this. You kind of just have to figure it out, and you can just, I don't know, like wander and not come back to it, and the game doesn't really get in your face like you have to go back and do this. Like either you remember to do it or you don't, and I don't know, I find that much more endearing than like this nagging sense of like screen clutter almost, where it's like you're responding to messages at work. If you work on a laptop, you're just like, oh, I got this notification in the corner, I have to answer it. Like that's how so many of these games are. Like I remember I played Skyrim for so long. I probably played close to 100 hours. I did not beat it, and I remember by the end I was just like, God, this game never fucking ends. Like I feel like I've been doing side quests forever, and if I still look on my map, it's giving me dozens of things to like do right now, and I'm just never gonna do it. And like, fuck it.
Well, I think the 3 most influential RPGs of the last generation were Dark Souls, Skyrim, and The Witcher 3. And what you're describing about Valhalla, I think, is part of another major transformative effect on video games, which we can talk about another time, which is the Witcher 3 effect.
I thought you were a better horseman.
For the record, I was riding a mouse.
For someone who usually trots around on a roach, that shouldn't present a challenge.
Where you try to make side quests as meaningful as the main quests. And obviously there was the recent moderate failure of Cyberpunk 2077. I actually eventually enjoyed it when I played it, debugged. But
I actually really want to play that game now that like I've got a PlayStation 5. It's so fascinating how much how massively they fucked that up.
It was a shocking experience because to me, The Witcher 3 is just the pinnacle of video game narrative.
Yeah.
And so I think this is a pretty good point to leave off for maybe a future conversation about another game or another type of games. But I'd like to know if you have any like closing ideas about like what Souls likes and Souls games in particular have done for video games, and what you might like to see from them next in like a game like Elden Rings.
I really think the kind of emphasis on the challenge is, to me, its biggest influence, because games today are, again, I said this before, but it's not so much that they're easy because they're not. Like you do have to have some sort of mastery, but it's so you're put on rails without even them putting you on rails. Like
Mhm.
with the open world, the Ubisoft formula, it's like okay, I know I got to go to this checkpoint so I can see a bigger part of the map. I know I gotta get this gun. So I know I gotta get the double jump so I can get to this area or whatever. Or like in
Yeah.
Zelda, like where it's like at some point I know I'm gonna get this fucking hook shot. There's every single Zelda game they've ever made. It introduces the hook shot, and now
Yeah.
when am I gonna get that? I think Breath of the Wild actually like deviated from that, but like
Yeah,
it's a
yeah.
similar.
But it had
It,
its same five.
yeah, and it's sort of a similar thing, and like I think that's what I struggle with most when it comes to finding something new to play is this kind of this sense that there may it's not even necessarily that it's not challenging, but it's all something that I've done before. And obviously there's a balancing act because you do need to be able to rely on the gamer's familiarity with the basic concepts that make any of this legible to anyone or instinctive. But at the same time, you want to do something that's a little just a little bit more engaging. And I think the kind of immediacy of the Souls games, the fact that you can't just like you know uh, kind of float through, coast through, you really have to be engaged. And even the way that filters down to some of the roguelikes where you can get a really good at any moment you could just die. I mean, I was playing Returnal. I recently beat it, and I think I'm close to the secret ending. But like Returnal is a game where like areas, you can be like riding high with this like wonderful combination of items and abilities and weapons, and then like just the wrong roll of the dice, and you'll just fucking get destroyed in a room out of nowhere. And I think that kind of like that is still really engaging to me because I always do want to come back one more attempt to figure it out, as opposed to some of these like I mean I don't know what's a game that I played that was not super. Oh, like I was playing
Yeah.
Monster Hunter Worlds. It just like put me off. So again, terrible vibes, horrible vibes in that game.
Yes, I
But
had
like
a similar
it,
experience.
it was a similar thing where I was just like, God, it's a big old map. They have nothing on screen. There's 1,000 things to look at on screen, none of which has been explained. And like, what am I gonna do? I'm just gonna, I have to kill 6 of these dinosaurs so you can like get the dinosaur gun too. And like everything of that is like everything in that game went along those lines. And I was like, this is just so unappealing to me that I think I played it for 2 hours and then I deleted it because it was like, fuck it.
I honestly see a negative conclusion that we've kind of come to, which is about a system that went on in games for a long time to pad out, content, which is the grind. And I think Dark Souls, it has no grind. And I think that's one of the things that makes it one of the most excellent games.
It really respects your time, and I think it's like, and it's never unfair. Like I think every time that I died, it was because like I knew what had happened. It wasn't some bullshit. They were never unclear. It was just like you did the thing wrong, but you can do it right, and then you won't die. And I think that sort of purpose was really engaging, as opposed to like. Man, I don't know. I'm trying to think of a game that I played where it was both like it was just dreary. I don't know. I'm not coming up with any good examples, but maybe actually, honestly, Resident Evil. I know you enjoyed it, but when I was trying to play the Resident Evil Biohazard and like running around with this clunky mansion, getting my ass kicked by this like zombie who would I shoot him 10 times in the face and then have no idea how much it matters, and I just die anyways. I was just like, I'm out of this shit.
Here's the secret. Don't shoot him at all. Just run.
God damn it. Yeah.
But I feel you. So I'd like to end this up with letting people know where they can find your article and like generally like some of the other pieces maybe that you've done that you'd like to get out.
You can find the article by just Googling The Ringer and Dark Souls. I think it's the piece they wrote about it.
Okay.
I have a personal website which collects most of my writing, which maybe I can link to, but it's just my name. It's jeremygordon.xyz. I am usually on Twitter, although I have been taking a break as I try to finish some writing projects. But just generally across the internet, I mean, there's Jeremy Gordon is unfortunately a more common name that I'd like, which means that I've made it my personal mission to destroy all of these other.
Oh, the other Jeremy Gordon.
Well, it's not like a super common name. It's not like Joe Smith, but there's a few. I mean, there is like. There's like I think there's like a rabbi, there's an artist, like a fine artist who's been around for decades named Jeremy Gordon. Like there's just people out there, which means that, it's like Highlander, I have to get to the top of the Google SEO mountain.
Yeah.
But as far as recent pieces, I mean, I think the Dark Souls thing was the most recent thing I published because, like I said, I've been working on some other things, but mostly I've been doing a lot of music profiles for the New York Times this year, which is always enjoyable. And then, it's general essaying about like social media and pro wrestling and so on and so forth. And
I would like to suggest to people generally his piece on New Japan Pro Wrestling and also his piece on Anthony Fontano, often maligned, often beloved music critic on the internet. Both of them are extremely fascinating. Thank you, Jeremy. This was awesome. I hope that we can talk about games again in the future or other media.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love that.